What if the way to escape the simulation was written down decades ago, but we've been too caught up in our virtual paradise to notice? In 1981, a French philosopher wrote a book that Matrix fans would later recognize as the hollow vessel hiding Neo's illegal software. But beyond its Hollywood fame, this book holds something far more valuable, a detailed map of our simulated prison, and perhaps the keys to our escape. But before you roll your eyes thinking this is another simulation theory video, let me tell you, this isn't about whether we live in a simulation. This is about something far more unsettling. According to Jean Baudrillard, we're trapped in something worse than a simulation. We're lost in a world where the real has disappeared entirely, and we don't even know it's gone. Think about it. When was the last time you experienced something purely real? That sunset you photographed for Instagram, were you truly experiencing it? Or were you already framing it as content? That moment of joy you felt, was it genuine? Or were you already imagining how you'd tell the story to your friends? That relationship you're in, how much of it exists in text messages and social media posts rather than in physical reality? Baudrillard wasn't just warning us about fake news or virtual reality. He was trying to tell us something more profound, that we've created a world so saturated with copies, images, and representations that we've lost our ability to distinguish what's real from what's simulated. And here's the twist: the simulation isn't running on some advanced quantum computer. It's running in our minds, in our culture, in the very way we perceive and interact with the world. But there's hope. Hidden in the dense pages of Simulacra and Simulation lies a radical idea that understanding how we got trapped might be the first step to breaking free. Not through some sci-fi red pill, but through a fundamental shift in how we see and interact with reality. You might be thinking, this sounds like abstract philosophical nonsense, but look around you. We work in virtual offices, fall in love through dating apps, invest in digital currencies, and spend hours scrolling through carefully curated representations of other people's lives. We're not heading toward a simulation, we're already drowning in one. What makes this book different from other philosophical texts is that it doesn't just theorize about our condition. It exposes the mechanisms of how we got here. It's like a mirror that shows us not just our reflection, but the entire system of mirrors that's been distorting our view of reality. The truth is, most people who quote Baudrillard or talk about simulation theory have never really understood what he was trying to tell us. They've taken his ideas and turned them into exactly what he was warning us about: another layer of simulation, another copy without an original. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down the real message of Simulacra and Simulation, not the Hollywood version, not the meme version, but the actual philosophical roadmap that might help us understand our predicament. And maybe, just maybe, show us a way out. But I have to warn you, once you understand what Baudrillard was really saying, you can't unsee it. Every social interaction, every piece of media you consume, every authentic experience you have will be forever changed. Are you ready to see how deep the rabbit hole really goes? If you've ever seen The Matrix, you might remember the scene where Neo hides his illegal software inside a hollowed-out copy of Simulacra and Simulation. This wasn't a random choice by the Wachowskis. They understood something crucial, that this book contains ideas so powerful, they could fundamentally alter how we see reality. Jean Baudrillard wrote Simulacra and Simulation in 1981, decades before social media, virtual reality, or the metaverse. Yet somehow, he described our current world with uncanny precision. But unlike modern theorists who focus on technological simulations, Baudrillard was pointing to something far more fundamental: the death of reality itself. Let me explain what I mean by that. Right now, you're watching this video on a screen. But you're not just watching it, you're probably thinking about whether to like it, share it, or comment on it. You're already processing this moment through multiple layers of simulation. The real experience is buried under layers of social media protocols, digital interactions, and cultural programming. This video itself is part of what Baudrillard would call the precession of simulacra, a copy without an original. I'm taking his complex ideas and creating a simplified version, which you'll then interpret through your own understanding, share with others who'll create their own versions, and so on. The real meaning keeps getting buried under more and more layers of interpretation. But here's where it gets interesting. Baudrillard wasn't just describing this process. He was offering us a way to understand it so deeply that we might find a way to break free from it. Not by rejecting technology or trying to return to nature, but by understanding how these layers of simulation work and how they've come to dominate our lives. In this video, we're going to explore 4 key concepts from simulacra and simulation. First, we'll look at what Baudrillard means by simulacra, copies without originals. Second, we'll explore his 4 stages of simulation, showing how reality gradually disappears. Third, we'll examine how this affects every aspect of our lives, from our relationships to our beliefs. And finally, we'll discuss what this means for those of us who want to find a way out. But this isn't just philosophical theory. What Baudrillard described has become our daily reality. Think about authentic experiences. When you travel to a famous location, are you seeing it for what it is? Or are you seeing it through the lens of all the photos and videos you've already seen? When you try to be yourself, are you actually being authentic? Or are you performing a version of authenticity that you've learned from social media? These questions might sound abstract, but they cut to the heart of our modern existence. We're living in a world where the line between real and simulated has not just blurred, it's disappeared entirely. And according to Baudrillard, this isn't just happening on social media or in virtual worlds. It's happening in our politics, our economy, our culture, and even in our personal relationships. The reason this book is so crucial now, more than ever, is that we're reaching a point where the simulation is becoming perfect. With AI, deep fakes, and virtual reality advancing rapidly, we're creating a world where the distinction between real and fake becomes meaningless. But Baudrillard would say we're missing the point. The real danger isn't that we can't tell what's fake anymore. The real danger is that we've lost the ability to care about what's real in the first place. As we go through this exploration of simulacra and simulation, I want you to keep one question in mind. If Baudrillard is right, and we're all trapped in a simulation of our own making, what would it mean to find a way out? And more importantly, would we even want to? Let's begin our journey through one of philosophy's most challenging and relevant texts, and see if we can find not just understanding, but perhaps a path towards something more real than what we're experiencing now. To understand why simulacra and simulation offers such a powerful perspective on escaping our simulated reality, we need to step back and look at the world Baudrillard was observing when he wrote it. The late 1970s marked a crucial turning point in human history. Television had become the dominant force in shaping public opinion. Advertising wasn't just selling products anymore, it was selling lifestyles, dreams, and identities. The media wasn't just reporting reality, it was creating it. And Baudrillard was watching all of this unfold with a growing sense of unease. But his insights didn't come from nowhere. They built upon a rich tradition of philosophical thought about reality and representation. Plato's cave allegory had warned us about mistaking shadows for reality thousands of years ago. Later philosophers like Guy Debord had written about how modern society was becoming a society of the spectacle, where authentic social life was being replaced by its representation. What made Baudrillard different was his recognition that we'd moved beyond even that. In his view, we weren't just preferring the copy to the original, we'd reached a point where there was no original left to copy. Think about how we experience love today. Our ideas about romance don't come from direct experience. They come from movies, books, and social media. We're copying a love story that never existed in the first place. Baudrillard saw this pattern everywhere. In politics, leaders weren't just manipulating reality. They were creating hyper-real situations where truth became irrelevant. In economics, money had become completely detached from any real value, floating in a system of pure simulation. In culture, authenticity had become just another product to be packaged and sold. But here's where the history gets really interesting. While Baudrillard was writing about this in the early 1980s, he couldn't have known how prophetic his words would become. He described a world where reality would be replaced by signs and symbols of reality. And then social media came along and made that literally true. He wrote about how we would start to prefer the map to the territory, and then Google Maps came along and actually changed how we experience physical space. He described a world where experience would be mediated through screens and images, and then smartphones arrived to make that our constant reality. The truly fascinating thing is that Baudrillard wasn't just describing a problem. He was trying to show us something profound about human consciousness and our relationship with reality. He understood that humans have always created simulations. It's how we make sense of the world. The issue isn't the existence of simulation itself, but rather what happens when we lose our awareness that we're simulating. This is where his work becomes particularly relevant to anyone interested in consciousness and spiritual awakening. Baudrillard was essentially describing a massive collective dream that we've all agreed to participate in, but unlike most dreams, we've forgotten that we're dreaming. He saw this forgetting happening in stages. First, we created representations of reality, like early religious icons or maps. Then, we began to modify reality to match our representations. Think about how cities are now designed to be Instagram-worthy. Next, we started creating representations with no connection to reality at all, like most of what we see on social media. And finally, we reached the point where representation becomes its own reality. Welcome to the metaverse. But here's the crucial point that many miss about Baudrillard's work. He wasn't just being a doom and gloom prophet warning us about the end of reality. He was trying to show us that understanding this process, really understanding it, might be the key to seeing beyond it. This is why Simulacra and Simulation isn't just another philosophical text. It's more like a manual for understanding the nature of our collective illusion. And just as in many spiritual traditions, the first step to awakening is recognizing that you're asleep. The parallels with spiritual teachings are striking. When Buddhist texts talk about Maya, illusion, or when Hindu philosophy discusses the concept of Leela, divine play, they're pointing to something very similar to what Baudrillard was describing, the way we humans create and then become trapped in our own representations of reality. The difference is that Baudrillard was showing us how this process works in our modern world, with all its technological and social complexity. He was giving us a map not just of individual delusion, but of collective simulation, and perhaps a way to see through it. Let's get to the heart of what Simulacra and Simulation is actually telling us about escaping our simulated reality. The key isn't about unplugging from technology or moving to a cabin in the woods. It's about understanding the 4 stages of simulation that Baudrillard identified, because these stages are the actual mechanism of our imprisonment. Stage 1. The basic image. This is where we start with something real and create a representation of it. Think of early photographs or realistic paintings. They're faithful copies of reality, and everyone knows they're copies. This stage isn't dangerous because we maintain a clear distinction between the real and the copy. Stage 2. The distorted image. Here's where things get interesting. The image starts to distort and pervert reality. Think about Instagram filters or photoshopped magazine covers. We know they're manipulated, but they start changing how we see reality. We begin comparing real faces to filtered ones, real bodies to edited ones. The map is starting to influence the territory. Stage 3. The masked absence. This is where we hit dangerous territory. At this stage, the image pretends to be a faithful copy, but there's no original anymore. Think about reality TV shows. They pretend to show real life, but they're actually creating a new kind of reality that never existed. Or think about influencers who present authentic moments that are carefully staged and scripted. Stage 4. Pure simulation. This is where we are now. The image has no relation to reality whatsoever. It's pure simulation. Think about how we experience most of our lives through screens, how our main form of communication is through emojis and memes, how our relationships are mediated through likes and shares. We're not just looking at copies anymore, we're living inside them. But here's where Baudrillard offers us something profound. He suggests that understanding these stages, really understanding them, is the first step towards seeing through them. It's like becoming lucid in a dream. Once you recognize the mechanisms of the simulation, you can start to navigate it differently. Let me give you a practical example. Think about how you experience a moment of joy. In our simulated world, the typical response is to immediately grab your phone, take a picture, post it, and then check for likes and comments. The real experience gets buried under layers of simulation almost instantly. But what if you understood this process? What if you could see it happening in real time? This awareness itself becomes a kind of escape hatch. Not because it lets you exit the simulation entirely, Baudrillard would say that's impossible in our modern world, but because it lets you maintain a different relationship with it. This is where Baudrillard's ideas intersect with ancient wisdom traditions. Many spiritual teachers talk about the importance of being the witness, of observing your thoughts and experiences without getting completely lost in them. Baudrillard is suggesting something similar, but at a collective cultural level. He's saying that our real prison isn't the simulation itself, it's our unconsciousness of it. We're trapped not by the images and copies that surround us, but by our failure to recognize them as images and copies. The real matrix isn't our phones or social media or virtual reality. It's our unquestioning acceptance of these simulations as reality. But here's the most radical part of Baudrillard's message. He suggests that once you truly understand how deep the simulation goes, you stop trying to find some pure reality behind it. Instead, you learn to surf the waves of simulation with awareness. You can participate in social media, use technology, engage with modern culture, but you do it with a kind of double consciousness. This is the real escape he's pointing to. Not an escape from the simulation because there's no outside anymore, but an escape from its total domination of your consciousness. It's about maintaining awareness of the layers of simulation while still being able to navigate them. Think of it like being able to read the code of the matrix while still operating within it. You can see the mechanisms, understand the patterns, recognize the simulations, and this awareness itself becomes a form of freedom. The most unsettling question Baudrillard's work raises isn't whether we're living in a simulation. It's whether we've become simulations ourselves. When you really sit with this idea, it can shake you to your core. Take a moment right now to look at your own life. Your hopes, your fears, your desires. How many of them are truly yours? When you dream of success, what does that image look like in your mind? Is it your authentic vision? Or is it a collage of images you've absorbed from social media, movies, and advertising? Let's go deeper. Think about your personality, the way you present yourself to the world. Are you really being yourself? Or are you performing a character based on what you think you should be? When you post on social media, are you sharing your life? Or are you creating a simulation of what you think your life should look like? These questions might feel uncomfortable, and they should. Baudrillard isn't just questioning our external reality. He's questioning the very nature of our internal world. If we've been raised in simulation, surrounded by simulations, thinking in simulations, then what does authenticity even mean? But here's where something remarkable happens. When you fully accept that there's no pure reality to return to, it can actually be liberating. It's like what happens when you realize you're dreaming but choose to stay in the dream. Suddenly, you can engage with the simulation differently, not as an unwitting prisoner, but as a conscious participant. Consider your relationships. In our hyperconnected world, we're constantly performing for an invisible audience. Every moment becomes potential content, every experience a possible post. But what if we embraced this awareness? What if, instead of trying to be authentic in a world of simulation, we focused on being consciously present within it? This is where Baudrillard's ideas become deeply personal. He's not just describing a philosophical concept. He's pointing to something that affects every moment of our lives. The way we love, the way we grieve, the way we celebrate, all of these experiences are mediated through layers of simulation. Think about how you process emotional experiences. When something significant happens in your life, is your first instinct to fully feel it, or to think about how you'll share it? When you're going through something difficult, do you experience it directly, or do you immediately start crafting it into a story that fits familiar narratives? The real emotional weight of Baudrillard's message isn't in its bleakness. It's in its potential for awakening. Once you see the simulation for what it is, you can't unsee it. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like gaining a new sense, an additional layer of awareness that lets you navigate reality more consciously. The question then becomes not how to escape the simulation, but how to live meaningfully within it while maintaining awareness of its nature. It's about finding a way to be genuine in a world of copies, to connect authentically in a network of simulations, to find meaning in a hyperreal landscape. Perhaps the most profound insight is that the very awareness of simulation becomes a form of reality in itself. When you recognize the constructed nature of your thoughts, desires, and social performances, that recognition creates a new space of consciousness, a gap between you and the simulation. This is where real freedom might lie, not in escaping the simulation, but in the space of awareness that opens up when you recognize it. It's like learning to see the screen you're watching rather than just the images on it. The images don't disappear, but your relationship with them fundamentally changes. And maybe that's what Baudrillard was really trying to tell us. The way out isn't through rejecting the simulation or trying to find some pure reality behind it. The way out is by developing a new kind of consciousness that can hold both the simulation and our awareness of it simultaneously. So how do we actually apply Baudrillard's insights to our daily lives? How can understanding simulacra and simulation help us navigate our hyperreal world more consciously? Let me share some practical ways to implement these ideas. First, let's talk about social media use. Instead of trying to quit platforms entirely, try experiencing them as what they are, pure simulation. Next time you're scrolling through your feed, notice how each post is carefully constructed, how each image is selected and filtered, how each caption is crafted for maximum impact. Don't judge it, just observe the mechanics of simulation at work. Here's a practical exercise. For one day, every time you feel the urge to share something on social media, pause and ask yourself, am I experiencing this moment, or am I already converting it into content? This simple awareness can help you break the automatic cycle of simulation. In your relationships, start noticing when you're performing rather than being present. Are you having conversations, or are you creating content? Are you sharing experiences, or are you staging them? Again, the goal isn't to stop participating, it's to participate consciously. Let's look at consumer behavior. Baudrillard noted how products stopped being just objects and became signs of lifestyle and identity. Next time you feel the urge to buy something, ask yourself, am I buying this for its use, or am I buying it for what it represents? You might notice that most of your purchases are about acquiring symbols rather than objects. Here's another practical tool. Create designated, simulation-free spaces in your life. These aren't spaces without technology. They're moments where you consciously engage with experience directly before it gets processed into content or performance. It could be as simple as having coffee without documenting it, or watching a sunset without reaching for your phone. In your professional life, notice how much of your work involves managing representations rather than realities. How many hours do you spend crafting the perfect email? Maintaining your professional image? Creating presentations that simulate productivity? Understanding this can help you navigate workplace dynamics more effectively. One powerful practice is what I call simulation spotting. Throughout your day, try to identify the 4 stages of simulation we discussed earlier. Notice when you encounter simple copies of reality, distortions of reality, masks for missing reality, pure simulation with no connection to reality. But here's where it gets practical on a deeper level. Once you start seeing these patterns, you can use them strategically. Instead of being unconsciously shaped by simulations, you can consciously engage with them. You can choose which simulations to participate in and how to participate in them. For example, instead of mindlessly adopting trending behaviors or opinions, you can recognize them as simulations and choose whether they serve your authentic needs. Instead of automatically performing for the invisible audience of social media, you can decide when and how to engage with these platforms. Remember Baudrillard's key insight. The simulation isn't just external, it's in our minds, in how we process reality. Start paying attention to your thought patterns. Notice when you're thinking in memes, when you're mentally composing social media posts, when you're imagining yourself as a character in your own life story. This awareness creates a kind of mental escape hatch. You can't exit the simulation entirely, but you can create spaces of consciousness within it. These are moments when you're aware of both the simulation and your participation in it. Here's a powerful daily practice. At random moments throughout your day, stop and ask yourself, is this real or is this simulation? Apply this to your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, your relationships. Don't try to find some pure reality. Just notice the layers of simulation at play. The goal isn't to live without simulation. That's impossible in our world. The goal is to develop what we might call simulation literacy. Just as media literacy helps us understand how media shapes our perceptions, simulation literacy helps us understand how simulations shape our reality. As we wrap up our exploration of simulacra and simulation, let's address the question we started with. Can this book really show us how to leave the simulation? The answer is both yes and no, and that's exactly what makes Baudrillard's insights so powerful. You see, trying to completely escape the simulation is like trying to step outside of culture or language. It's impossible because these systems are part of how we understand and experience reality. But what Baudrillard offers us is something perhaps more valuable. The ability to see the simulation for what it is, to understand its mechanisms, and to navigate it consciously. Think about what you've learned today. You now understand that the simulation isn't just about technology or social media. It's about how we process and experience reality itself. You've seen how the 4 stages of simulation operate in your daily life, from simple copies to pure simulation. You've recognized how your own thoughts and desires might be shaped by simulated models of reality. This knowledge changes something fundamental. From this moment forward, you'll start noticing the layers of simulation in your life. You'll see how reality gets processed, packaged, and represented. You'll become aware of when you're performing rather than being present. This awareness itself is a form of freedom. But here's what I want you to remember. This isn't about rejecting the modern world or trying to find some authentic reality underneath it all. It's about developing a new kind of consciousness that can hold both the simulation and our awareness of it. It's about being able to participate in the hyperreal world while maintaining a clear understanding of its nature. Let me offer you 3 specific ways to take this forward. First, start paying attention to your automatic responses to experience. When something happens in your life, notice your impulse to immediately convert it into content, to shape it into a familiar narrative, to perform it for an invisible audience. Just noticing these impulses creates space for more conscious choices. Second, experiment with different levels of engagement with simulation. Try having experiences without documenting them. Practice being present without performing. See what it feels like to let moments exist without turning them into content. Not as a permanent way of life, but as a way to understand your relationship with simulation. Third, share your insights with others. Start conversations about how simulation shapes our lives. Not in a judgmental way, but with curiosity and awareness. Help others recognize these patterns in their own lives. If you've resonated with these ideas, there's more to explore. Baudrillard's work is just one lens for understanding our relationship with reality. You might also want to look into Buddhist concepts of Maya, Marshall McLuhan's media theory, or contemporary discussions of digital consciousness. Remember, the goal isn't to wake up from the simulation, it's to become lucid within it. Like a lucid dreamer who knows they're dreaming but can still engage with and learn from the dream, you can participate in our hyperreal world while maintaining awareness of its simulated nature. This awareness might feel uncomfortable at first. You might notice things you can't unnotice. You might start questioning aspects of your life you previously took for granted. This is normal. It's part of developing a more conscious relationship with reality. If this video has sparked something in you, take action. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Start discussions about simulation in your own circles. Most importantly, begin paying attention to how simulation operates in your daily life. The real power of simulacra and simulation isn't in offering an escape route. It's in providing a map of our current reality. And like any good map, its value lies not in getting us out, but in helping us navigate more consciously within. This is your invitation to start seeing the simulation differently. Not as a prison to escape from, but as a complex system to understand and navigate with awareness. The choice of how to use this awareness, that's up to you. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. Keep questioning, keep observing, and keep developing your awareness. The simulation isn't going anywhere, but your relationship with it can transform completely. If you found value in this discussion, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might benefit from these insights. And let me know in the comments, how do you see simulation operating in your own life? What aspects of your reality might be more simulated than you previously realized? Until next time, stay aware, stay questioning, and remember, understanding the simulation is the first step toward conscious participation in it.